first thing the man did after returning to the beginning of the apocalypse was to abandon all his teammates. Then he pulled out an AK and started firing wildly. His teammates raised their hands in surrender. But the man showed no hesitation, because in this world there was no one worthy of his trust anymore. In his previous life he was an orphan. He faced everything alone no matter what came his way, until dungeons appeared worldwide at one point. Countless bloodshed and disasters struck each city. At the same time, a divine light granted powers to many. These humans could undergo an awakening. They could acquire unique skills, and the structure of the world changed dramatically. But for Yu Ran nothing was different. He had already seen through the filth of this world. Then he seemed to see a ray of hope. A man who killed monsters and protected the weak without seeking any reward. He righteously declared that he would defeat the ultimate boss and save the world. At that moment Yu Ran's sense of justice was awakened. After countless battles with monsters, he finally found teammates worth sacrificing his life for. Perhaps joining them to save the world was actually quite interesting. When they reached the final dungeon's entrance, they were betrayed by an old ally. He stabbed Yu Ran in the chest from behind. It turned out that his friend had long been corrupted by power and glory. Once all dungeons were cleared, everything they possessed would disappear. So not only did Yu Ran fall victim, they poisoned their comrades one by one. Those they once fought alongside killed off through accidents. Heroes were merely tools in the face of power. Yu Ran looked at the faces of the betrayers before him, and regretted everything as he fell. But just when he thought it was the end, he realized the story had only begun. At that moment dark clouds filled the sky and a red moon appeared. It was the very first day dungeons appeared in the world. Yu Ran looked at the career options before him completely stunned. Unexpectedly this time, a new option had appeared, Dark Apostle. This role differed from the Divine Light. It didn't grant powers to every player who chose it. Only those admired by the Dark Apostle could gain unique skills. This role could not only wield curses and poison, but even summon slain monsters to fight for them. To become stronger, Yu Ran unhesitatingly selected this option. In his past life there was a man called the King of Death Warriors. It took the combined efforts of all guilds to barely defeat him. This time for revenge, he would let himself become a demon. He would tear Zhang Qian, that scum, into pieces. The next day Yu Ran went to the Firebird Guild to register as a hunter. While he was reading the agreement, the manager laid out a few skill pages. This was actually a test, to see if he was an awakener. At that moment Yu Ran noticed a skill called Blood Poison. It allowed him to convert his blood into poison. Although not very strong, it would become incredibly powerful when combined with Bloodstone magic. Without hesitation Yu Ran tore off the skill page. A blue light flashed, marking his official entry into the guild. A few days later he accepted his first dungeon mission, an E-rank Goblin Cave. The guild assigned a few disposable characters to participate in the hunt. Hearing their names Yu Ran chuckled. In his past life he had never heard of these people. It seemed they weren't worth paying much attention to. After a brief rundown of the mission, a blue portal opened slowly. On the other side lay the dungeon space. Yu Ran began inspecting the surroundings. Judging from the claw marks on the tree roots, there should be quite a few goblins here. Seeing that Yu Ran was a newcomer, a bald man assigned him the most dangerous task of scouting. However, Yu Ran had been an elite hunter in the 7th floor dungeons not long ago. This was the perfect chance to act on his own. After distancing himself from the team, he encountered 3 goblins. Yu Ran chuckled. This was a good opportunity to test his blood poison skill. He cut his palm, letting the poison coat his weapon. After a flurry of attacks, he found that the level 1 blood poison had limited effect on monsters. Although Goblin's combat style was simple and easy to handle, the longer the fight dragged on the more they would gather. This was the reason why so many rookie hunters ended up dying at the hands of goblins. In the end, many rookie hunters die at the hands of goblins when attacking base damage increases by 10% against goblins for a quicker fight. Yu Ran pulled out a goblin whip he had prepared. Due to its suppressive effect, the monsters couldn't approach him at all, and they all fell into a state of fear. Soon he had slaughtered the entire group of goblins. This also gave him an opportunity to level up. He even earned a new achievement, the Watched. Meanwhile, the 4 side characters thought they'd sent Yu Ran to his death. They figured they'd split all dungeon rewards, but they overestimated their own strength. The bald one was quickly surrounded by goblins. After barely surviving, they huddled in a clearing, too scared to proceed. They were like frightened birds, jumping at every sound. Meanwhile, Yu Ran was actively hunting more goblins to level up faster. Finally he unlocked the first powerful skill of the Dark Apostle. Excited, Yu Ran opened his skill book. It allowed him to summon monsters he'd personally defeated. This was a growth skill. The former king of death warriors had also used it to gain dominance. Without hesitation Yu Ran tore the skill page. Though the skill wasn't powerful yet, he tried summoning a corpse. A skeleton shakily stood up, wielding a small knife, striking a few times. Its combat abilities were weak, so he knew he'd need to plan long-term to strengthen it. Meanwhile, the side characters were badly beaten by the goblins. A level-up notification appeared behind them. Only then did they realize new guy was still fighting. Yu Ran knew the best weapon against goblins was fire. Under cover of night as the goblins rested, he blocked the cave entrance with firewood, and threw his torch inside. A blaze illuminated the sky. The goblins woke in panic, but trapped by smoke in the blocked exit, they lost their lives screaming. But this was not just about leveling up quickly, was to lure out the hidden boss. Sure enough, after this maneuver, the goblin chief emerged from the ground behind him. In this beginner-level dungeon, this massive creature was like the embodiment of death. But Yu Ran showed no hesitation. He pulled out a longsword ready to fight. Just then the little skeleton charged forward to face the boss. The tiny skeleton looked determined, charging with its tiny toothpick of a weapon. It leapt forward, fiercely attacking the chief's legs. Its movements were smooth and precise. Yu Ran was surprised to see that the little skeleton fought exactly like him. In his past life before rebirth, he had mastered almost every weapon type. Now the skeleton seemed like his replica. Although weaker in strength, its nimble footwork made up for it. With a swift stab to the chief's head it ended the fight. Yu Ran chuckled. He had initially thought these undead warriors were useless. Now it seemed he needed to revise his plans. Since he defeated the dungeon boss, the Dark Apostle granted him a legendary skill page. Yu Ran smirked coldly. He was one step closer to his goal. At that moment the guards outside noticed the dungeon's collapse. They were astonished by his swift completion. He had cleared the instance in just one day, potentially setting a new completion record. The side characters finally broke free from their nightmare. The guild leader noticed only 4 returned safely, which meant another might have died in the dungeon. Just then a voice announced, "Someone else has come out." Yu Ran walked out, hands in pockets exuding confidence. He left without a word to anyone. The guild leader hurried after him, eager to ask what had happened inside. The bald one thought a glitch had saved them, allowing them to survive, but now it was clear the man before them had single-handedly cleared the dungeon. To save face, he and the others started concocting a story. The bald one claimed his injuries were because that newbie Yu Ran charged into the goblin horde to grab loot. He claimed he was injured, saving Yu Ran's life. However, Yu Ran didn't bother explaining. A reputation for greed was perfect for working solo. To avoid encountering Zhang Qian too soon, Yu Ran decided to start from the farthest dungeons. The next day he went to the guild and applied for a dungeon called Beast Hunter. Due to his bad reputation, no one wanted to team up with him, which suited his plan perfectly. This was a C rank dungeon, one he couldn't clear at his current level alone. But Yu Ran had his skeleton summoning skill. His first target was an elite monster. Although it was challenging, the remains of such a beast would create a much stronger skeleton soldier. Just then a monster lunged at him. Yu Ran dodged with a sliding maneuver, performing a spinning move to avoid a lethal strike. But the elite monster's defense was strong, leaving only a small scratch. Yu Ran swiftly dodged another heavy blow, weaving under the monster's legs, drawing a dragon with one hand, a rainbow with the other, and finishing with a swift thrust. The monster, immobilized, was left defenseless, ready for the kill. Yu Ran finished it off with his longsword. The first skeleton soldier emerged. Elsewhere in the guild, 2 men were in a secret discussion, looking over the bald man's report. One man was shocked. It was a summary of Yu Ran's profile. Their investigation showed that the last dungeon was cleared solely by Yu Ran, and now this newly awakened guy had applied for another dungeon. Though they appeared calm, they were inwardly astounded. Meanwhile Yu Ran was totally relaxed, not needing to handle monsters himself. The only downside was the limited durability of the skeletons. Jumping off his perch, he lightly touched another corpse. As long as he had enough spirit power, he could endlessly summon skeletons. This left the orc utterly confused.
แล้วออกไปขุดไส้เดือนมาตัว2 ตัว
Chỉ có các cao tầng mới có. Từ khi Long Điện tồn tại đến nay,
เตรียมไว้ให้ปลาคราฟตัวเล็กกิน
cũng chỉ có 9 viên xuất thế.
ปลาป่าทุกชนิดส่วนใหญ่ชอบกิน
Ngay cả quốc chủ cũng chưa chắc đã có cơ hội dùng. Ngươi trộm dược liệu quý giá như vậy, giết cả gia tộc ngươi cũng không oan uổng. Đúng vậy.
มันทำให้หน้าฉันรู้สึกเหนียวหนืดไปหมด
Nhìn khắp thiên hạ, cũng Cũng là, vật quý hiếm như phượng mao kỳ lân. Vật quý hiếm như phượng mao kỳ lân.
มันก็พลิกตัวกลับจมลงไปในน้ำอีกครั้ง
Chắc chắn là ngươi đã trộm. Ngươi, đồ vô lại.
เจ้าบ้าเอ๋ย เจ้าบ้าเอ๋ย
Vẫn lớn tiếng phách lối như vậy. Vẫn lớn tiếng phách lối như vậy.
การเคลื่อนไหวของปลาคราฟตัวนี้เมื่อครู่
Tiêu thần, có vẻ như ngươi biết mình đã bị thương nặng.
ไม่เหมือนปลาทั่วไปที่โง่ๆทื่อๆไม่เหมือนปลาทั่วไปที่โง่ๆทื่อ
Nên bất đắc dĩ phải dùng chiêu này. Nên bất đắc dĩ phải dùng chiêu này. Nên bất đắc dĩ phải dùng chiêu này.
ๆเสียงของลุงใหญ่ดังมาจากนอกบ้าน
Giá trị liên thành, giá trị liên thành, giá trị liên thành.
The dungeon has been successfully cleared. You may return to the city in 1 hour. Looking at the contents of the beast hunter's stomach, Yu Ran marveled at its indiscriminate diet. But then, he noticed something unusual. Some of the corpses bore cuts that looked like they were made by a blade. With his years of experience, Yu Ran deduced these were the result of a sneak attack from behind. The clean, precise cuts suggested the handiwork of a skilled assassin. The attacker was clearly a seasoned ambusher. It was likely someone within the Firebird Guild, killing to steal equipment and silence witnesses. With only an hour left before leaving the dungeon, Yu Ran frantically searched every corner for clues. Just then a glimmer caught his eye in the distance. He hadn't expected to find a tiny hidden cave nearby. The entrance was small, only allowing one person through. Inside there was a skeleton. There were no wounds, likely starved to death. The markings on the walls hinted at someone hiding here, unable to leave due to a pursuer. Seeing the emblem on the cloak, he remarked how ruthless Li Longwen was sparing no one. As he examined the remains, a small book fell out. Yu Ran picked it up and flipped through it. He hadn't expected it to be Li Longwan's blacklist. Closing the book, he couldn't help but feel this was a valuable find. At that moment the system granted him a legendary skill page. It was as if luck was on his side. The skill was called the Eye of Anubis. Its effect allowed him to see the memories of the dead. Without hesitation Yu Ran tore the skill page. They say the dead keep their secrets. But that was no longer the case for him. The dead can't lie after all. Yu Ran activated the skill immediately. A dark aura emerged from his eyes, transforming into blue light that entered the skeleton's eyes. The light illuminated the surroundings. Fragments of memories flashed through Yu Ran's mind. The betrayal by allies, the desperate escape. The dead man was revealed to be Li Longwen from the Firebird Guild. As the spell ended, Yu Ran set the remains down. He clutched his head in pain, clearly exhausted from the memory reading process. But with these memories and the blacklist, he now had leverage. Meanwhile with Li Longwen, man lay battered on the ground. Apparently his subordinate had allowed Yu Ran into the dungeon without permission. Li Longwen didn't want anyone discovering his dark secrets. In the guild Li looked at a report with disdain. Even though Yu Ran's dungeon record had been thoroughly checked, the bald man's rumors about Yu Ran being greedy had tarnished his reputation, true or not. After all, no one could clear dungeons solo forever. But then a call came in from the front desk.